From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we talk about Bayview's 71 different lake captains that lived in Bayview, Wisconsin from 1878 to 1968 in the age of sail and steam. Now today, this episode and all the episodes are sponsored by the Historic Bayview Lake Captains Society. Forgot that. Okay, now today I'm in the quintessential spot in Bayview down by the lake, with the quintessential view of the sailboats, cloudless sky, mid-70s, beautiful day. I've got to bend down just a little bit so you can see me in the camera because my tripod won't go high enough and the water level is low enough, otherwise you'd just be looking at sky. So hopefully you can see some of the boats behind me. Hopefully. Now this is a very brief introduction to a special segment titled Bayview's Band of Brothers. This segment emphasizes the interconnectivity of all these captains as family, band of brothers. Of the 71 captains, 40% were related. There's 8 sets of brothers, 8 different sets of lake captain brothers, all lake captains. And those brothers, quite a few of them are like 4 There were the Kearns brothers were 4, the Leask brothers were 4, the Brownell brothers were 4, 3, probably a 4th. So not just 8 sets, but not just like there were 2 brothers. Some were, of course, like the Morbeck brothers, Rudolph and Charles. Have an episode on them too, as I do the other ones I just mentioned. But when you say a set of brothers, that doesn't mean just 2 make up the set. 4 was a lot. 4 was common. Okay. Then there were also 3 sets of fathers and sons that were Bayview Lake captains. And there was 1 set of cousins. So, and a lot of times they lived together. While they were captains, their families crowded into little houses together. Pretty close families, close-knit families. That's what you get out of all of this. A lot of them trained each other how to sail. A lot of them would take over one ship command after the other one moved on to another ship command. Got an episode coming up on that too. Anyway, Simon Stanhope is going to tell you more in the upcoming episode, here in the narration segment of this episode, I should say. And he'll go through the sets for you. So I hope you enjoy that. Pretty big deal, I think, to see that many relatives, all Bayview Lake captains, connected. Okay, pretty cool. So I will now say, hats off to Bayview's Lake captains. And I will see you in the next episode. And if you get a chance, come on down to the lake. It's beautiful. Okay, bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Today we won't be discussing a particular Bayview Lake captain, but rather a group of them, specifically those that were related by family. 28 out of the total of 71 that were Bayview Lake captains were family relatives, either brothers, cousins, or fathers and sons. That's nearly 40% of the total, and of these 28, 16 of them, or 57%, were immigrants. We will now explore these captains, beginning this discussion with, of all things, William Shakespeare. Yes, that William Shakespeare. He is the one that created the term Band of Brothers over 425 years ago. It appears in Shakespeare's play Henry V, Act 4, Scene 3, where King Henry V is trying to rally his vastly outnumbered troops prior to the Battle of Agincourt against the French in 1415. The more complete passage from Shakespeare's script provides a better context for Henry V's inspiring speech as follows. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for today he who sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. One of the things that makes William Shakespeare's literature so great, among so many other things, is that it still metaphorically applies to our lives today, across nations, continents, and the world. His term, Band of Brothers, is but one of these metaphors. It most definitely applies to those 28 Bayview Lake captains that were all relatives. While these captains weren't preparing for a battle in a war, per se, metaphorically, that's exactly what they were doing. In those days of sail and steam on the Great Lakes, leaving the family behind to go out to sail professionally on the lakes was akin to going to war. Every single day, for years. Sailing the lakes back then wasn't anything like it is today. Back then it was just plain dangerous, life-threatening dangerous. One Bayview lake captain once told reporters that the rough seas found on the Great Lakes, especially in the fall and spring, could be monstrous and rivaled any sea condition found anywhere in the world. Another Great Lakes ship officer who sailed in the merchant ship convoys in World War II between the USA and Murmansk in northern Russia had a similar take. Even though he made this passage often during the winter months, in the notoriously horrible sailing conditions of the North Atlantic, North Sea and Barents Sea, he still felt that the high seas he found later on the Great Lakes far exceeded anything he had seen on these wartime convoy journeys. And both of these were steamship sailors aboard steel-hulled ships. Imagine trying to sail through these conditions on small wooden schooners, of which in the mid to late 19th and early 20th centuries there were nearly 5,000 sailing routinely on the lakes. In addition to these dangerous sailing conditions, minimal nautical equipment and technology with limited capability also posed a serious risk in the early days on the Great Lakes. Ship captains back then didn't have any of the following things found today that would have made sailing so much safer. Radar that would let captains see through fog. Global position systems that would tell them their location on the lakes within feet in an instant. Radios that could provide a means to call for help. Before radios, carrier pigeons were used for quite a while as the only way to contact the shore. Coast Guard rescue helicopters and rescue boats and ships for prompt sea rescue. Weather radar and up-to-the-minute weather forecasts that would provide advance notice of coming storms. Mobile phones that could call for help from anywhere, and more. Ships then were made mostly of wood, including masts that would snap like twigs in a gale. Propulsion systems weren't always safe either. Boilers could, and many times did, explode, and with no fire codes, shipboard fires were common. Once a fire started, it spread fast. Injuries were also common, and sometimes captains and sailors didn't come home. 4 Bayview lake captains did not. Even electricity instead of candles to provide stronger, more powerful ship's lights to help avoid collisions at sea didn't exist for decades. None of these truly life-saving innovations and advancements were available for the vast majority of Bayview's lake captains. Once they left port, they were on their own. Yes, life on the lakes for sailors on the Great Lakes was a dangerous and risky undertaking in the days of sail and steam. But what this family of Bayview's lake captains did have was each other. Not only did they look after each other on the lakes, they often lived together, their large families sometimes sharing one floor of a house. They were inseparable and extremely close. They depended on each other and helped each other a lot. There is literally example after example of this happening for each set of relatives that were all Bayview lake captains. They bravely faced the harsh conditions of the Great Lakes together. These brave sailors, this band of brothers. In fact, of the 28 Bayview lake captains that were related, there were 8 sets of brothers, 3 sets of fathers and sons, and 1 set of cousins. This is an astonishing number, representing 40% of the total of 71 Bayview lake captains. Collectively, they covered every aspect of sailing, from fishing boats to 1, 2, and 3-masted schooners, to early steamers, to full-fledged steamships, to passenger liners, to freighters, and to car ferries. Indeed, if one wanted a representative snapshot of Bayview's lake captains, a quick look at these band of brothers would capture it. As mentioned at the start of this video, the majority of Bayview's band of brothers were not only relatives, but also immigrants. They arrived in America from Norway, Prussia, Sweden, Scotland, and Canada. This meant, for some of them, that not only were they arriving in a new country, they also had to learn a new language. Most had sailed professionally before arriving here, so it was probably the one thing they possessed that provided some comfort and stability once they got to Bayview. With this background, we will now look at Bayview's lake captains that were all family related, Bayview's band of brothers. On the screen you see now, they are broken down by cousins, brothers, fathers and sons. The ones with the red asterisk after their names are to be featured in upcoming videos on this channel. The others have already been so featured. This concludes our discussion about Bayview's band of brothers. It is recommended that you now pause this video if you'd like to study their names on this list more thoroughly. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about Bayview's band of brothers, as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now by individual volumes on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website under the Contribute button. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. That is the only surviving intact ship, once captained by at least 2, and likely 3, different Bayview lake captains. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.